Good afternoon, and thank you everyone for attending today's webinar, Online Reputation Management, presented by Sam Gaines. Please be aware that there will be a question and answer portion today at the end of the webinar. To avoid frequent interruptions during the webinar, please type your questions in the question box located on the right of your screen. They will be answered in the order received during the question and answer portion. Additionally, an electronic version of this presentation will be emailed to all participants following completion of today's webinar, and a recorded version will be available on the website for members only. Again, we would like to thank you for attending, and I'll now turn things over to Sam.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sam Gaines. I'm the Director of National Partnerships and Sales at Raider8, and appreciate you having me on the webinar to just present on online reputation management in general. Looking forward to just presenting and kind of talking about this. It was fun to put together. So as a just high-level overview of what we will cover today, I'm hoping to answer a couple of questions for you, and that is just what is online reputation management, which review sites matter, and then provide you with some actionable next steps that you can take now. So why is this important? I would say first and foremost, 2020 online reputation management is important. We know that patients are going online to read reviews about the doctors. Here's a statistic that found 95% of the respondents to this survey and 97% of millennials found online ratings and reviews somewhat to very reliable, and 70% said that online ratings and review sites had influenced their choice of physician. 41%, even if they were referred by a physician or friend, were still checking out that doctor online. So let's imagine that. Let's kind of put ourselves in the shoes of a patient. Imagine that we just saw our primary care physician and they gave us the name of 2 orthopedic surgeons. They said that these are the 2 best providers in the area. So what do we go and do? We look up those providers online. This is the first profile that we find. Again, one of the best orthopedic surgeons in Fort Myers, Florida, and here would be the second provider. We know that this is really all that patients have to choose a provider is online reviews and what's said about them online. They don't know how good a surgeon's hands are, and so it's important to be making that best first impression. If a patient is looking up your provider specifically, they're looking for confidence that that's the best choice for them. So which profile here instills more confidence, and who would you go make an appointment with? All right, so taking a step back, what is online reputation management? Essentially, it's any content that you put out about yourself or that others put out about you. So anything said about you online. That would include your website, which I hope that you all have, but if not, that'd be a great place to start. Also include online reviews, news and press releases, and blog and video content. So again, we're going to be focusing today on online reviews. I wouldn't say that it's the most important here, but I think it's really the differentiator currently and what is driving a lot of care decisions for the patient. 2 questions I like to ask to start the conversation off would be, have you Googled your practice or doctors lately? And what's your online reputation management strategy? Your being underlined here because your strategy may be different than the doctors down the street, right? So it's important to figure out what your goals are and then figure out the best way in which to achieve those goals. And before we get started, I just want to talk a little bit about the problem with online reviews, and that is that they're not easy to leave. Unhappy patients are the most motivated, and happy patients promise to leave a review, but just as quickly return to their daily lives and forget. I know this to be true because the average online rating for a doctor in this country is a 3.6, and the average within our platform, and I imagine others, is a 4.8, and that's completely ungated and unfiltered. So again, I think there's a little negative bias here if you're not doing something really to actively build reviews, and the goal is just to make it as easy as possible for your patients who are happy, and we know that most of them are, to share their feedback online. So which review sites matter? Where do we ask them to leave their feedback? I'll say that it could be, Google is at the top for a reason here, but all these sites are very important, and it could be different for each provider, right? So going back to the have you Googled your doctors lately, Google them and see which review sites appear on the first page. I think anything that appears on the first page is important. We make a joke here at Raider8, the second page is where you could bury a dead body. So not to say that those sites wouldn't be important, but again, just kind of do a search, figure out what's important to you, and it could also be location specific, right? So I've heard that in certain geographies, health grades is more important than vitals, right, and vice versa. Another thing to consider is what's required of a patient to leave a review on each of these sites. So what we're seeing, kind of the trend here, is standardization across a lot of these online review sites, and really they're just trying to make it now as easy as possible for patients to leave a review. Drilling down, we used to see health grades have a handful of additional questions. Now it's really just provide your rating, provide your email, and that's about it. The biggest difference I would say here currently is with Google. So Google, you have to have an account to leave a review. I think you'd be surprised how many patients do have a Google account though, seeing that you have to have one to use YouTube, Google Docs, and Android phones are dominant in this country and mostly tied to Google accounts as well. So let's talk a little bit about Google. It's extremely important today. Reason being is that it's not the only search engine in this country, but it does account for about 90% of all searches across the globe and about 95% of searches that are done on mobile in this country. And over half the searches today are done on mobile, so it's becoming increasingly more important. A few different searches that I want to talk about with Google today and just kind of show you essentially what your patients are seeing when they search for your practice and providers online. These three searches would be the practice name search. So again, just searching for you specifically by practice name or by doctor's name, and the local search example. So in practice name and doctor's name search, patient is looking for you specifically, right? They're aware of you. Another reason that Google is so important is this local search example. So orthopedic surgeon near me, ophthalmologist near me, or doctor near me. Who's popping up? It's going to be a way to attract a lot of new patients who may not be familiar about your practice or your providers yet. We'll talk about that here in a second. So starting off, I just want to show you a couple of these searches. Practice name search is what we're looking at currently. And you'll notice that when I search for, it's actually one of the California MGMA members, Rancho Family Medical Group, in their Menifee location, this Google My Business listing appears on the right-hand side. Now, my eyes are immediately drawn to this picture, right? So if we're talking about a patient's first impression, this is it. It's important to have a nice professional picture. The next thing I notice is the star rating and number of reviews here. You'll also notice that Google can aggregate reviews from around the web, and they also it pulls out some reviews here, kind of what they see as being most important. Now, anything on the left-hand side in the organic search results that attracts my attention has what's called a rich snippet. So we see Yelp rating, we see health grades. Furthermore, looking for a provider online, same type of situation, right? So we've got a nice professional profile picture, the rating, and a few different sites popping up in the organic search results. We see health grades here, vitals. Now, what's crazy about this is when we do the same exact search on mobile, this Google My Business listing is taking up the entire real estate now. So we don't even see those other sites, vitals, health grades, without scrolling. And again, we know that over half the searches today are done on mobile. So it's important to be making this best first impression with those patients that are looking for you specifically. Now, local search example, what about those patients I talked about, helping patients who may not be familiar with you find you? And that is this local search example. So I typed in family practice physician near me, and what happens is Google populates the screen with what's called the Google 3-pack. Now, there are a lot of different factors that go into this, and I would say that we'll talk a little bit more about the ranking factors here. What we have seen from our clients is that a high number of reviews, a high star rating, and recency of reviews will help you appear. And we'll talk again about the other factors here in a minute. These three profiles that appear in the 3-pack get about 90% of the clicks. So again, we've got statistics here that will show appearing in here and outshining the competition is going to attract a lot of new patients to the practice. Another thing I want to point out with this local search example is there's a few different places that it can pull from. So right here, we're seeing it pull from the online reviews of the patient reviews here. So as we build more reviews on a listing, that's going to add more SEO authority behind it, more likelihood that your listings can be triggered in a search. The other place that we've seen it pull from is your website. So having great website SEO is important for this local ranking as well. We know that Google is looking at your website, scraping those pages. So again, just having keywords, conditions you treat, or services that you provide on your website will help your profiles appear. One last slide just to drive this home. How many people are actually seeing these profiles? Again, our goal is to get patients through your door to see your providers. We know that typically they're going to visit the website before that, but this is what they're going to see before even getting to your website. And the goal here would be that if we're seeing over 28,000 people view this profile during a 3-month period, we want to get those 28,000 through your door, right? But we need to make a professional first impression to get them to take that next step and to have or take one of these actions on the profiles. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the local ranking factors here. These would be the ranking factors of essentially who is appearing in that local 3-pack. Now, Google doesn't make it known what the actual ranking factors are. These are studies that are released by other companies who look at hundreds of thousands of listings and essentially tell us what is important. So kind of some themes and trends that we've picked out would be the biggest change is an emphasis on Google My Business signals. So you'll see that over here. That would be proximity, so the location the patient is searching from, category of the Google My Business listing, and keywords in the business title. That's now 25%, and it was 19% the year before. And this is in line with what we're seeing, updates to the knowledge bar of the Google My Business profile, which is essentially the ability to create posts, have a Q&A session with your visitors of the profile, and also messaging, secure messaging within that profile. So it's clear that Google is wanting users to use this Google My Business or these listings as a way to create and distribute content. Review signals is also on the rise for years. So back in 2015, this was at about 10%, and now we're upwards over 15%. So review quantity, review velocity, and review diversity. Diversity, interestingly enough, is actually reviews found about you on other sites that are not Google, right? So even Google knows it's important for you to have reviews on other sites like Healthgrades, Vitals, Yelp, etc. So we know that for some things to go up, others have to go down, right? And so in terms of trending, citation signals, which would be essentially NAP consistency, or what Google is finding out about you other places around the web, that used to be at 13.3%. It's now at 10.82. So I think the key takeaway here is that, and I think this is where a lot of misinformation comes online, just about what is online reputation management and what's important. Directory updating is important, right? We want to make sure that you have consistent name, address, phone number across the web, but I think it's really those, you want to focus now on the big ones, right? So that would be Google, Apple, Facebook, Yelp, Bing. The other 100 directories I think are less important. And in terms of NAP, this is what we're talking about. So name, address, phone number. Again, I don't think it's super important, but I want to point this out because this is extremely common. This would be what I find on an address that I find on someone's website, and then what I find on their Google My Business listing. You'll notice that the abbreviation is, or road is abbreviated here, as well as the suite number where it's spelled out here. So again, I don't think you need to go update a bunch of different directories, but I think it's important that if you're going to create a Google profile, or if there's profiles that you're managing online, just make sure that the naming convention and that your phone number and address are consistent. Okay, let's talk about Yelp. Yelp is a funny one, and I brought it up just to kind of be proactive here. So I'm not sure if you are aware, but Yelp is actually, it's a crowdsourced review forum that doesn't want you to solicit online reviews. It was actually started by 2 former PayPal employees as an email-based referral network after one of them had caught the flu and had trouble finding an online recommendation for a local doctor. Now we think about it more for restaurants and things like that, but essentially Yelp does not want you to solicit online reviews. They have a 0 review solicitation policy. What could happen is they could put a consumer business alert on your listing, which would negatively affect your ranking on Yelp and obviously be a big red flag for patients. So do not ask for reviews. What you can do with Yelp, just to give you something actionable here, is have patients check in. If you have good standing with Yelp, they'll even send you signs that you can put in your waiting room, and essentially patients check in on Yelp, let Yelp know that they're at your office. Yelp will then send them a invite to leave a review, and these are the ones that stick. Many of you may be familiar with their bucket of not currently recommended reviews at the bottom of the listing. They have an automated engine to read through reviews and essentially decide if it's something that's worth counting towards your aggregate rating and showing. So to make sure that the reviews that patients are leaving stick, because we want them to, right? If they're going to take the time, ask them to check in on Yelp, and that will help improve your score. Okay, so actionable next steps that you can take now. First would be just capture your baseline, right? Have you Googled your doctors or your practice lately? That would be just figure out what the doctors and your locations rating are on Google and on the other sites that are appearing on the first page. And you can have a couple different people at the office do this, because we may be sitting in the same office but using different computers, and you may get different results than I might, right? It's tracking cookies and things like that. So do it from a couple different computers and capture that baseline. Next would be start collecting patient feedback if you're not already. I view this as a proactive approach to managing your online reputation, right? You can figure out what patients or any areas that may need your attention before you're reading that in your Google reviews or Yelp reviews, etc. So I think collecting patient feedback is really important. You can't improve what you're not measuring. Next would be to create or claim your Google My Business listings. The funny thing about Google is they do a really good job of automatically creating Google listings for doctors, and then they make it a total pain to try and claim that listing so you can edit it and put the correct information there, right? It'd almost be easier if you were just able to go out and create it yourself and not have them do it for you. But nonetheless, thank you, Google. They've got it already there. Creating or claiming that Google My Business listing is important, right? We've shown that this is the patient's first impression more times than not, but it's also a way in which patients who may not be looking for you can find you. And that's going to help drive a lot of volume to your practice and hopefully new patients to come through the door. Next step would be to carve out your strategy. So again, you're being underlined because your strategy may be different than, and even two doctors in the practice, right? So take a step back and just ask, what are your goals? If the doctor's goal is to have, a 4.0 rating on every review site, then you may want to be targeting those sites that may not be as important, but are important to him. If the goal is to attract as many new patients as possible, I would highly recommend focusing on Google My Business, and again, having that complete polished profile. Next step would be to ask your patients to post a review, right? So work with a lot of clients that they use business cards, even just asking your patients where they heard about you, right? If you, in your local market, you're learning that a lot of patients are reading your reviews on Healthgrades, then maybe it makes sense to ask your patients to leave a review on Healthgrades. But just start asking. If you never know if you don't ask. And then lastly, look to automate the process. If that's not working, or you're not seeing the results that you expect from handing out those business cards, there's a lot of companies out there that can help with this, that can help automate the process, save you time, and improve the results that you're seeing. So I absolutely flew through that. I'm going to give you back some time of your day, but we'll open this up to any potential questions, and appreciate you taking the time to listen.
Okay, if anyone has any questions, you can type them in the question box. We don't have any yet.
Perfect. I did a good job of answering the questions proactively. Yeah, but anything online reputation management related, I'd be happy to answer for you all.
Yes. So is there anything else that, someone said thank you. This was very helpful.
You're very welcome. And I know that Alex will distribute my information, even if you're not interested in working with Raider 8, be happy to be a resource for any of you just in terms of online reputation management in general. It's something that I live and breathe every day, so it's something that I find interesting, and I'm always happy to help if I can.
We have one question that says, how should we handle a bad review?
So depending on what is said in the review, because there are certain steps that you can take, most sites are not going to let you just delete or essentially delete a review. So a lot of what you'll see out there online, and really what our strategy is to bury that negative review with positive reviews, right? You also have to just leave it up to your patients. If we've all heard that story about, that one patient who just, it wasn't even the doctor's fault. They just are going and bashing them on all these different sites, right? We have to leave it up to our patients to digest the information that's said about their online about the doctor and kind of make their own informed decision of, if we've got 10 reviews here, 9 of them are very positive and 1 is negative. We know that doctors aren't perfect. We know that it could have been a rough day, but at the same time, is it reasonable what this patient is saying? And so I would say that if there are steps that you can take, reach out to Google. If there's threatening, vulgar content, they're likely happy to help you remove that. But the alternative would be just bury that with positive reviews.
Okay, and someone said, how can we change a personal cell phone listed on Vitals? We can't get them to respond at all.
So each site is different. Google, with Vitals, I believe that you have to be the doctor to claim, or you, as the doctor, they can sign off and have someone that is authorized work on that profile. If Vitals is not being responsive, I don't know exactly what you can do there. So that would be a tough one. If you want to shoot your contact information through the Q&A, I'd be happy to look into that a little bit further and follow up with you.
Okay, next question. Should we respond to bad reviews or just let them go and bury them with positive reviews?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'm going to flip back here. So all these ranking factors, they're all very relative, right? So we know that responding is important. Again, we're seeing like review quantity and velocity are very important, right? So having a high star rating, a high number of reviews are important. And so is responding, but only if those around you are responding, right? So I think it's definitely a strategy and something that'll become more and more important as we have, more doctors interested in building reviews and working with online reputation management companies. I think that responding could be that differentiator. I believe that the studies and kind of data that is out there talk about it's responding within a timely manner too. So I think it's 24 or 48 hours you want to respond to, and they also weight it differently, responding to positive versus negative reviews, responding to negative reviews being more important than positive reviews. Now, the funny thing about responding to reviews in healthcare is that you're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place, because you're not technically allowed to acknowledge that that person who left you a review is a patient, even though they're clearly doing so. So, having kind of a templated response to just quickly fire off, and maybe a couple different ones that you rotate to say, the positive ones, thank you for that great feedback. Using the person's first name is always very helpful. But when there's an unhappy patient, trying to take that offline as quickly as possible, giving them the contact information for someone that they can reach out to and talk about their experience and try to remedy that.
I reply to each review, and since we have so many recently, I'm running out of different ideas to thank them for their review. What is your typical reply to good reviews?
Yeah, exactly what I was just saying. So I would say just try and think of a couple of things to rotate. And I wouldn't say that it's, so there's two pieces of responding, right? There's the local ranking piece, all of this, it potentially affecting who's popping up when someone does, doctor near me searches, but it's also the patient's perception. So It's also the patient's perception. So them reading through that, I don't think it's necessarily important to respond to every positive review, but if you can just think of about a couple different templates, and I'd say for the positive reviews, maybe respond to about 20 of them and not everyone in a row, and then just have a couple different templates, have them rotate and try and personalize it where you can.
Okay. What specifically can we do to get more reviews?
Yeah, so you can work with a company like mine or various others that are out there. I've worked with numerous doctors that have created business cards that would have the little URLs and logos. I've even had doctors that would send their URLs to their listings to the patient while they're in the exam room. I think a good way to kind of start with this is just ask patients how they heard about you and where they learned about you. That will help you quickly understand where your patients are coming from, if it's Google or one of the other sites, and then just ask them to go leave a review about you there. I think business cards would be really helpful because I think that's the reminder that patients need, right? They leave the office and they have 100 other things to do. So when they see that business card again and they have some free time, that will go. And obviously, using a solution like Rater8 or one of the others that are out there is a great way to kind of automate that and just see increased results. But I think you can definitely make an impact just simply asking patients or handing out those business cards.
The next one, we have 3 practices over our city and we Google our practice. The Google listings don't show star ratings unless you, the patient, click on the actual practice. This inhibits us from easily gathering more reviews. Any recommendations?
Yeah, so basically what you're seeing is if you were to type in one of the addresses or like the full address after your practice name, I think you would pull up that individual Google listing. And again, you got to keep in mind that patients could be seeing different things than you are. If let's say a patient is in a certain part of town right next to one of your offices, if they type in your practice name, they may be pulling up that, that nearest or closest office. And it's also, I think it could play into your benefit and it could not, but this is something that's very common. We work with a lot of groups that have multiple locations. So it's great to have that, and I think it's important. That way patients who are looking for that location and need to find it for the address and things can easily do so. But I wouldn't necessarily say that that would be hurting your chance at building reviews.
Can you explain the difference between Apple and Bing?
Apple and Bing. So Apple, I'm not exactly sure what you're looking for. Bing is, I think, a Google product and just one of the search engines, but an Apple is Apple. I would say that seeing that Google accounts for over 90% of the searches done today and over 95% of the searches done on mobile, that's where you should focus your efforts. And the other sites like Bing and Foursquare and Yahoo are more so just important for the small citation signals, having that NAP consistency and really that directory updating. But again, in terms of themes and trends here, we're seeing that consistently go down and these other things become more important. I think actually Bing is a Microsoft search engine. So again, just different search engines, but Google is really dominating today.
HIPAA is the biggest challenge. How can you respond to a negative review and avoid HIPAA?
Yeah, the biggest thing is just to take it offline as quickly as possible. So an example of response would be, I'm sorry that you had this experience. And if you have someone that kind of manages it, you say, please reach out to Jane Doe. Here's her email, here's her phone number. We'd love to talk to you about this further. It's such a tough one responding to reviews, especially because we're finding that it is important for local ranking because of HIPAA, right? So we've got clients that that don't even respond to any of the reviews, and they're still seeing the benefits of, appearing in that three pack, attracting new patients, etc. So I don't think that responding is the most important thing. Do it where you can and try to respond quickly to those negative reviews, and just try to take it offline as easy as possible without really identifying that patient or confirming that patient was a patient.
Is it important to respond to positive reviews?
It is important to respond to positive reviews, less important than responding to negative reviews. But again, I think 20% is a good rough ballpark target to respond to. And just think of a couple of rotating templates. It doesn't have to be crazy, but just vary a couple words. And again, I think key here is making it somewhat personalized so they know that it's actually a human responding. Just could be as simple as using their first name in the response, and be happy to kind of share a couple, follow up with you all and share a couple templated responses that would be positive.
I noticed that we have a Google listing for the name of our business and for the owner, who is an MD. Do you know how we can merge these two listings on Google, or should we just leave them separate?
Yeah, great question. So we actually, not trying to send everyone to the Raiderate website, but we do have an extensive guide on Google My Business. And it sounds like if this is a solo doctor practice, really one doctor at the practice, Google's best practices are to have one combined listing. You can look up or just, type that into Google and the naming convention. So they're what they recommend is having the practice name followed by the provider name, and the provider name would be John Doe, MD, right? Don't be repetitive and put Dr. John Doe, MD, practice name, semicolon, John Doe, MD. So to do that, you can actually just merge. I think you'd actually have to close one of those listings. And any really specific or tough Google My Business questions, we do have a handful of consultants in-house that would be happy to just talk through any of these with you. So feel free to reach out to us. But that would be the recommendation: is you have to be able to, you have to own those profiles, and then once you do, to close one of them and merge them into one to be the practice and the provider listing.
Is Vitals something a doctor can claim as their business, or is it only patient-driven?
So Vitals is something the doctor can claim and change simple things on there, like the address or the phone number. But the Vitals, along with Healthgrades and Google, are all automatically created, or more times, frequently, I should say, automatically created and just there for the doctor. And then you have to confirm the identity before you can log in and make changes. I would say most of the content and really what patients are going there to read is all content that's driven by patients.
Is it true that once we stop using a service that continually monitors the review sites, the updated and corrected information, example phone number, reverts once it's not being watched regularly?
So that is, I have heard that to be true with, like, an example of a company would be Yext, and I know that there are others out there that do similar type directory updating. Again, this is my, I'd say, more so personal opinion, but in terms of what we're seeing with trends of what's important in local search ranking, we're seeing that citation signals and that NAP consistency continually go down. So I think that directory updating services are becoming less important, and it's more important to be building positive reviews, having a complete Google profile, having a picture, making sure that all of your Google My Business profile facets are complete, right? So the ability to link to your website, add an appointment link, have a short bio description. I think those are more important and would have a bigger impact on your bottom line in business, more so than having directory updating across 100 different sites. But with Yext, I have heard that yes, once you stop working with them, all of that does revert back. I believe that there are companies out there that you you get to keep the benefit of what you paid for. One of those would be Chatmeter. Another one would be actually, I believe, Moz. Moz Local is one of those companies right here, this source. And then Suite IQ would be another one of kind of directory and listing management.
Does anybody else have any other questions? Nope. Okay, so thank you, Sam, for presenting the webinar today, and thank you everyone for attending. And we will be sending out the presentation as well as Sam's contact info. If you have any further questions, you can contact him directly.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of your lunch and your week.
Have a good day, everyone.